Okay, good morning, everybody. Friday, May the 10th, CIP discussion, I hear. Should be a wonderful morning. Manager Stoltz, anything before we get going?
No, let's turn it over to the CFO and go.
The CFO and go. Lindsay Powerzo.
There you go. Lots of rhyming this morning. I was CSI a couple days ago, yes. Good morning, everyone. So we are here to talk about the 2025 to 2029 tentative recommended capital improvement program. This is going to be a lot of content, so please feel free to stand up and move around and go get a donut or do whatever. Please stop us as we go through our slides. This is less of a normal formal presentation and more of a conversation, I feel like. So please just stop as we go. Before we get into the details, we are going to do an overview of the process. We're going to then talk through facility and drainage projects. Then Lynn will come up and razzle dazzle you with the road and bridge portion. And then we'll come back for the real fun and talk about the financing of all of this. And Commissioner Dennis, to your question the other day, we have added a slide to talk through what's already in the plan for buildings that we're going to bond outside of this process. So we'll get to that toward the end of the presentation, just so you know. So you all know that we have a capital improvement program, a technology review board, and a couple of other committees around the organization that essentially have the responsibility for combing through a consolidated list of all of the requests that come from departments. And our project services group from a facility side has the responsibility for putting together dollars, and then obviously Public Works has the responsibilities for putting together numbers for drainage, road, and bridge. So those capital improvement plans are defined by what you see here. So it's new construction, it's expansion, it's renovation, or a replacement project for an existing asset, has a total cost of at least $50,000, or it's a major maintenance or rehab project for an existing asset and has a total cost of at least $25,000 and an economic life of at least 5 years. So that's how we distinguish it. What it is not is what's listed up in this top paragraph. And I think this is where we hit some stumbling blocks sometimes, so I just want to highlight it. And that is, it's not heavy equipment, it's not vehicles, it's not technology, it's not operating equipment or furniture or software. We have different processes and procedures for going about those dollars. So this is literally just talking about the improvements that are outlined here below. So everything that you'll see today has been through that test, because there might be some that catch your eye where you think perhaps that's not accurate. Tom?
Can you talk to us about the authority of this? Is this county policy that the
Yes.
commission decides, or is there something other driving? For example, technology is not the same as it was 10 years ago. The commission would have to decide to enhance or subtract from this, right?
Right. So the commission did just approve a revised policy at the beginning of April, and it does include this definition. This comes from best practices. It also comes from how we tie it out to the debt policy. There are some instances where you're going to hear things like master control, or you're going to hear something about a PC upgrade later today. And that is technology, right? But it is technology that is so embedded within a facility that it's not truly technology review board type stuff. It's about operating the facility itself. It is something that if the facility were to go away, this stuff would probably go with it because it is so ingrained with the operations of that facility. So that's why we sometimes even struggle as staff, because technology has changed so much to figure out, does it fit nicely within CIP? Is it just operations, or is it technology review board? So we can definitely delve into those details as we go if you want to know why we determined that it belonged here versus some other process that the county has. But yes, to the extent the commission ever wants to change it, it is your policy, and we will figure that out. So again, we want to know what the capital needs are for all of our functions and divisions. We have 46 unique departments with various needs. Some of those are more urgent than others. Some of those we may consider more wants than needs. And so we try and reflect that through this process as well. Then we try to figure out as a committee through this policy how we can go about affording all of these things that we need for 46 departments and aging infrastructure. And then, of course, the whole intent of this is to communicate information to you all so that you can then turn it around and provide that information to your constituents. So the committee has grown over the years because we have started to realize that the stakeholders in CIP are varied. So you can see this list of wonderful humans who have spent a lot of quality time together over the last few months, reviewing all of the requests, having presentations from departments to understand what the needs are, and then coming together to put together the plan that you're going to see today. So my thanks to them. Most of them are here in this room. So just to walk through how this process begins, we have a request phase. Again, that's where on a facility side, departments will submit requests to the project services department. That then becomes something that our CIP committee reviews. If there are questions, we have written we'll have the written, very thick binder that we go through that then generates questions where we have presentations. The committee then, after hearing all of that information, prioritizes the projects, and we try and schedule them over a 5-year plan. And we do that by assigning rankings to 13 different categories for every single project. So that is a super fun exercise that we then aggregate those totals, and that begins our discussion. So even though we start with those scores, we don't necessarily define everything by those scores. We have robust conversation, sometimes with me trying to pressure the facilities folks to change their minds or change their priorities because I just don't like the dollars. And Andrew's not making eye contact with me right now, which is probably a good idea. So as we go through that discussion, the committee tries to talk through what are the most important things. And so we assign them to categories. There's 4 categories. Category 1 is what you'll see today as they're the most urgent, or they're a part of a preventive maintenance plan that's been established. And so we try and adhere to that. So that's going to go in year 1 of the CIP, or it's going to be a project that's spread across 5 years, depending on whatever the preventive maintenance schedule is. Category 2, we say is important, but not as urgent. And so those will fall into years 2 and 3 of the plan that you'll see today. Category 3 is something that we know needs to happen, but there's a much lower sense of urgency. And again, all of this is really defined by how much can we afford year to year. And then finally, category 4 is our watch list. And so these are projects where we felt like it was maybe the need wasn't quite readily apparent yet, or maybe there's more information or analysis that needs to be done before we're comfortable plugging it into a CIP. And I think what you'll see this time is that the watch list is going to span 2 slides for the first time ever. It's more than $14 million worth of needs that have been identified and we have put on the watch list. So I want to emphasize that while the watch list is not funded in this plan, it's got some serious dollars tied to it, and when it's ready and fleshed out, they'll probably move into the plan, and that'll become another price pressure for you all. So after we've assigned all of these things to categories, the policy says that I have the pleasure of getting back to try and figure out how to make it all work financially. And then I get to send that back to the committee for review. And essentially what we look at is, can we cash fund it? Does it make sense to bond fund it? If so, can we package things together? Are there synergies from doing projects together in certain years? Things like that. And then the committee basically says yes or no, or we argue some more. And ultimately we get to what you're going to see today then, which is a tentative recommended CIP. So I will tell you that there is debate about all of this amongst the committee, but just like a budget that the commission adopts, once it's adopted, it's your budget. This is our committee's plan. This is what we have endorsed to come forward to you, even though we know that it's probably not perfect either. So next steps from today, We'll have this conversation, then based on whatever feedback we get from you today or over the coming weeks, this will turn into what is in the recommended CIP that you get in mid-July. And then, of course, it follows the normal budget process. So whatever you approve in August will actually approve the 2025 column of this budget. Now, some of these projects are going to be broken across 2 years. And when that happens, we're still assuming that that year 2 is authorized. We're moving forward with that assumption, but otherwise it's just year 1 that's actually approved, and there is still quite a bit of flexibility and latitude for both the committee and the commission to come back and debate that in future years.
Lindsay, question just for clarity on the funding piece of it. CIP, does it exclusively reside in general fund or bonding, or are there other funds that it may?
So it depends on the project. Pretty much it is general fund or bond funding, but if back in, let's say when we'd had an EMS tax fund, if there was an EMS post that we were going to build and we didn't want to bond fund it, then we would use EMS cash
So
to
there's no
support that.
rules or guidelines. I mean, we have flexibility in what fund it comes from.
Yes.
Okay.
And so one of the things, for example, we'll talk about as one that's in the queue to be done. It's not going to be on today's presentation, but it'll be in the one that's already included in our debt forecasting. You all had approved an expansion of the household hazardous waste facility. We plan for that to be bond funded. The plan is when that bond is actually issued, that household hazardous waste will pay money, that fund will pay money into the bond and interest fund to equal the amount of debt service payment due for that each year. So we always try and be mindful of that source and plan for it. But it's, for purposes of today, we're going to talk about it either as cash funding or bond funding, just to simplify matters. But then that's why when you've seen departments come up and talk about, well, they had a capital improvement project last year, but there's not one included yet for 2025. That's because it's cash funding. We'll stick it in their budget at the appropriate time if you all endorse this plan. Good? Okay. So let's get into facilities and drainage. I'm going to do my very best to explain this, but I am going to have the full caveat that I am not a facilities person. And so if you start to ask me detailed questions, my friend Andrew and my friend Tanya will be looked to jump in and save me. So I'm just putting that out there now. I recognize my strengths and my weaknesses. So you also have at your seats a sheet that looks like this, and it is color-coded. So you'll see the nice red at the top here matches your nice red for category 1 on your sheet. So we'll walk through all of these, but you can see the details, pretty much the exact same content from here on here, but a comprehensive list. And then our financials will be on the backside. Now this is just facilities and drainage. You also have some road and bridge content at your seats, and Lynn will walk you through that in a bit. So what I'd like to do is just take a few seconds to describe each project. Again, it's great if this is conversational, so please stop if you have questions that we can try to answer. So the first several on this slide are ones you see every single year. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But the first is D25. That's our Wichita Valley Center flood control. So maintenance of the MS Mitchell floodway and everything that is necessary in order to ensure that we continue our accreditation and to keep that safe. So you can see that that is around $740,000 in most years. That is quite a reduction from last year. So Lynn did verify with the city that this truly is their plan. This is our half of those dollars, and this is what they really think is going to happen. So we've been able to capture a little bit of savings from what you saw last year. Replacing roofs on county-owned buildings. You can see that the dollars vary each year based on the roofs that are in the plan, the preventive maintenance plan, to be replaced. And then in 2029 right now, there are no roofs in that plan. So that is, it was initially done back in 2009. We had assessments done by qualified engineers who give us analytical and objective basis for that. And then we have our on-call who reviews this routinely in order to update and refresh and make sure that it's still current. The next is parking lots. Again, the same situation as with roofs. It's very specified each year based on the work that's actually planned to be done then. And so, again, this was about a 2010 initiative that was done. It is basically refreshed every few years, I believe. It's not as often as the roofs. Outdoor warning replacement. This is one that makes a lot of us a little bit cringe when we talk about it. We know that sirens are important, but we also know this is a whole lot of money that we invest each year. You've heard Julie Stimson talk about how critical, though, this is to her operations, and the hope that once this is all done, that we no longer have to have the annual $110,000 allocation in perpetuity that we had before we went to this new system. Elevators, I know this one is probably near and dear to Commissioner Dennis's heart, but this is the public elevators both at the main courthouse, the historic courthouse, and then also we have recently had the elevator in the parking garage adjacent to the main courthouse added to this list. And so this is an example of where it was phased in over time in order to ease the financial impact. So this is the schedule that we're currently on to have that completed. The next one is one that the commission has not heard about yet. This is the one I talked about before, where it seems like it could be ambiguous about whether it should be a CIP or whether it should belong in TRB. But at the juvenile court building, there is a computer that has door controls, and Herschel is here if we really gotta get into the details on this one. But these things have been in use since 2016. We all know that technology changes rapidly, and 8 years is a very long time for the operating software that's been controlling this, as well as what's at JDF, where there's 12 door control PCs, a logger, and a server. So the software is old. It needs to be updated to meet security standards, and we need to get some new machines as well, just to make sure that they are up to snuff to coordinate these security systems. We think this is a pretty small amount of money, and honestly, this is one that I would flag for you all as a potential ARPA revenue replacement need for this year. Because certainly the case was made to me very plainly about the risk that we have. They're doing a great job of piecing it together now and dealing with issues, but certainly this seems as though it was a priority to the committee. So you might star that one and keep that in mind for when we come back to that revenue replacement discussion. The final one on this list is a big ticket item, and it is the building automation system at the main courthouse and adult detention facility. And I'm probably going to look to Andrew to get into the details, but essentially it's a computer-based system that controls our heating, our ventilation, and air conditioning. It does operational and diagnostic troubleshooting of cooling towers, chillers, boilers. Here's something I'm going to say that I don't understand. Closed and open loop systems, if that means something to you. Circulation pumps, air handles, rooftop units, and all of that. And so it has gone obsolete. This is not something that we believe can sit for much longer. Andrew has worked with us to phase this out. So year one would be adult detention facility, because the risk of their system going down is greater than the impact there is greater than what the main courthouse is. So year one right now only includes the adult detention facility. Because of this work, we typically would want to try and bond fund something with this price tag, but this is going to have to be cash funded, which means that it's going to be in competition for your ARPA revenue replacement dollars, as well as just cash from year to year, a drawdown on fund balance potentially. So this is a big ask, and we get it. And Andrew, I'm going to pause here and let you speak to maybe the urgency that you perceive in anything that I screwed up in describing what it is.
So this system at the jail, we're doing a little bit more because we are getting into some of the components that are actually running the actuators and some of the valves that are running the air handlers and things of that nature. The outlying years, 2026, 2027, does the main courthouse. It does a number of other facilities too, like historic courthouse, Ronald Reagan building. Anything that's running on the current Metasys software that is running all of the HVAC for those buildings. So that software is basically 20 years old. It's obsolete. There's no longer support for the software. components so the valves, the actuators that run the valves out in the buildings, they are no longer able to purchase those valves, things of that nature. So we update this. We update the software. We update the actuators out in the field. At the jail, it's a little bit more thorough because we've had multiple failures with some of the equipment out there. So this number, we did evaluate the number in 2025. It was much higher. That's because the engineers estimated that everything needed to be replaced. We're going through with the estimate that 50% of it would need to be replaced, hopefully less. But that is our budget for 2025. And in 2026, 2027, we'll scrutinize that a little bit more before it comes to you next year.
So, Andrew, $11.4 million. Can you clarify exactly what this, are we replacing HVAC units also with this? Or is this just the system with the actuator? I mean, what?
This is just the software and
This is just the software.
And the components the software runs out in the building. So
$11.4 million for the software,
and the components out in the field. So it's not the entire air handler, but it would be the controls that are on the air handler to turn on the blower, open up the valves for the hot water, for the cold water. It's on the cooling towers. It's on the boilers. The controls are very thorough.
Yeah.
If this was your automobile, this is the point you'd say, should I just go get a new automobile or should I? This is really high ticket, but it is.
We're not
what it
getting
is.
a new jail or a new courthouse, though. So we got to maintain the ones. we got.
I get it, but I'm very, very curious about if there's other options of how we maintain it that's less than $11.4 million.
Understood. Well, and it's actually down from 13 million with Andrew's work. So
I get it.
We fully understand this was a watch list item last year because of the price tag. Andrew has done due diligence on it.
I believe
and
I know he has. That's a chunk of change.
It is. And I would emphasize what Andrew said, and that is they have value engineered, really, for lack of a better term, year one. And so I want to focus on that and then give him the opportunity to come back, hopefully, with some less expensive numbers in 26 and 27. But to me, this is something that it's a matter of, again, another matter of when, not if.
And this allows us to
So-
centrally control HVAC operations
That is correct.
for $11.4 million.
So we will have more conversation on this. Again, for now, I would focus on your
imagine we will,
2025
yeah.
figure primarily.
I will add, if we don't have that capability, if we have thermostats in the rooms, then we're giving building occupants the control to run the AC down to 60 degrees and leave for the night. And it's costing us more money in utilities for that.
Oh, I understand. I have a lot of buildings. I understand that. And we put systems in place where they can't do that. That don't cost $11.4 million. But I would want to know more about this specific line item.
We can get you more details in a complete list of buildings. It is. I mean, when you think about the adult detention facility, the main courthouse, Ronald Reagan, historic courthouse, it's a lot of space that we're trying to control.
Andrew, is it possible to, if you take commissioners over to the site,
That'd be helpful, yeah.
show them this system and explain how it operates so they can get a better grasp of this one? So,
Yeah, we can set that up.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Hey, I see grumpy faces and I get it, but I'm going to keep going. Yes, sir.
We'll wait till after these are done, or?
No, please.
Okay. Siren replacement.
Yes.
So it's probably, maybe it's a very quick discussion. And if Julie's watching, Julie, I think the world of you. But it's almost, in the course of a year, probably 3 or 4 times, all of us have all of our phones go off at one time for either a test or a alert. This just seems so old school. Everybody's got a phone. I know at one time, a couple of years ago, we talked about for, $500,000 we could get of every resident a
NOAA
quasi
weather radio.
alarm clock, whatever it's called, an alert.
Weather radio, yeah.
So if we're stuck, we're stuck. But one thing that was, I that one always, I just choke on that one, and I just maybe to not be embarrassed as one of the 50 largest counties in the country, maybe Elizabeth or somebody could do a survey, and if we found out that 40 counties were not using sirens and we were only one of 10 or one of 5, I'd really be embarrassed, and I'd say, thank you, but let's stop. But if everybody's doing it and we've obligated it, then we can do it. But I just don't have any idea if Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Kansas City are doing it. If they're doing it because we are in Tornado Alley, I'm okay.
My understanding is they are. We had that conversation a few years ago when we were talking about whether to even embrace this, because it was nearly a $5 million total price tag when we talked about it at the retreat. But there's nothing that says we can't follow up and confirm that, everyone's got fiscal constraints and that things haven't
Well,
changed.
and that last one in Andover, that I think Commissioner Howell and I were down at that one park that was in Sedgwick, and some of them said we never even heard the siren, and we're spending a lot of money, and some of these remote areas don't even hear the siren.
No, that was the other point I was going to make, is these are not intended to wake you up out of bed. These are intended, if you're outdoors, if you're close enough to hear one of these things. And by the way, there may be background noise, there may be wind blowing that carries the sound away. There's a lot of reasons why this is not the best system out there. And I agree with Commissioner Meister that technology, we're so weather aware today. If some weather looks a little scary, we have ways of finding out what's going to go on. People are tuned in. They have myriad of options on how to know what's going on. It would be unlikely someone would be surprised by a tornado today because a tornado siren wasn't heard. I'm beginning to think maybe this technology has outlived itself. It's time for us to maybe be 21st century way of doing this. I can't believe that across the entire state of Kansas, for example, that there's tornado sirens in every area of the state that everyone can hear an outdoor siren. I just don't think that's possible. So obviously there's going to be, there's going to be places where that's not going to be heard. Inside cities and stuff, I get that, but out in the county where there's very few people, it's a little hard to justify. So.
Well, and if I can, based on what you were saying, Commissioner, even last, whatever it was, Wednesday, there was so much advanced warning that we're going to have a storm that the city and the streets pretty much shut down without any sirens, even to the point where I got 2 emails from some deniers saying, "Oh, here's government shutting us down again," thinking it was a COVID thing, accusing us of doing it. But anyway, I agree with what Commissioner Howell's saying. There's so much advance warning going on, but maybe enough discussion.
That's good.
Different subject. Ever since I've been a commissioner, I've been interested in what it costs us per department or per organization. And the problem with the way that this is set up, sirens, for example, that's under emergency management. I don't know the total cost of emergency management because we split it out. Building automations at ADF, that's under sheriff. And so I don't know the total cost. We talk 70 million, but that's not the total cost of what it takes to support the sheriff. How do we know what it's really costing us per department?
So when this gets put together, to the extent that it is cash funded, we will actually put these projects in the appropriate department's budget. So the emergency management sirens will be a line item in the emergency management budget. Now, when you talk about adult detention facility, and that's the sheriff, it is, but that budget to maintain that building actually lives in facilities. We don't even assign that over to the sheriff. That's not even a part of his 80 million. Now, we do have a cost center associated with some programs like extension, but others are just building maintenance gets consolidated into one building maintenance fund center. And so to actually go through and break that out, we try to centralize those costs as much as possible. So we certainly could run a report for like utilities by address. We could do some of those things, but because there's, I guess, economies of scale, it might be challenging to actually break out to a very detailed level every single piece of the facilities budget. But at least from a project perspective, we can do that, and you'll see that reflected in the final budget.
Okay. But later on, you're going to get in bridges and roads and so forth. That's all under Public
Right.
Works. That's easy. But some of these, I don't really have a complete grasp of what it costs us. And I don't want to pick on the sheriff because I love him. But the sheriff is already 70 million or so. We're adding another 11 million on that. So what is the cost per prisoner that we have out there? And as we move forward, when we're getting up in high dollars, is there some other thing that we can do? I don't know.
So the sheriff is unique because we are able to assess costs back to municipalities. So we do actually have an analysis that we pay for each year where we get a jail rate. And so I can give you those numbers, and it will include all of these costs. But they're going to be unique because we don't do, rate studies for every single team. But I do think once we get to a recommended budget, one of the things we can do is take those departments with capital improvement projects and make sure to highlight those in our presentation to you so you can actually see what their bottom line budget looks like once we include these things.
Okay. The same with the parking lots. I don't know what you say parking lots. I don't know which parking lots those are, but those are obviously for different departments.
Right.
And so what is that department actually costing us?
Okay. And we can get the breakdown. We know exactly which buildings are being done by each of these, so we can get that information for you.
Thank you.
Could I just ask one question?
Of course.
Follow up on the sirens. Would it be okay if we did just like a refresher with Julie on
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
of that? Because we had that discussion a couple of years ago, but it's been a little bit of time, so.
Yeah.
it would be
Yes,
helpful.
we can maybe get her in for a staff meeting. Would that be okay, Rusty?
Yeah, that's fine. Sirens are not a statutory mandate. The county is required to provide some type of notification, but sirens are an option. And part of the discussion with the CIP was whether that was a decision point to move away from sirens or move away from the system that was not functioning well and costing money to maintain. So it's still a discussion. It's kind of the will of the people.
Sure.
There was a point in 2012 when the commission elected moving to a new software, the one that we're moving away from now, to take on responsibility countywide for all existing sirens. And so municipalities gave their sirens to the county to manage and maintain and activate. And so I know that there's passion out there. There are some cities who would want to keep theirs and reclaim them.
Well, I do have,
There's a lot of passion around sirens, but it's a will of the people.
yeah, I have a question about that because Julie, and thank you, Commissioner Lopez, for inviting her to do that. She's brilliant. She's going to give us all the info we need. But Rusty, do you know offhand, are these replacements because the current sirens are not going to be operable soon?
That's correct.
Okay.
When Julie did that presentation, the pictures, the videos, the things she was able to show us
Yeah.
of
I think
bird
that was
nests
probably
and rust
pre my
and-
time here, so I'm
It was,
kind of anxious
yes.
to meet with
Yeah,
her.
There was also to Commissioner House's point before on coverage, there was also, and John Marr was actually presenting it, there was a grid of how we're covered today and the grid of how we should be covered
Understood.
in the future. And that's probably particularly right now before we adopt budget would be a good time to revisit this if the commission.
They
wants
have
to
added
look
some new sirens in order to enhance coverage beyond what it was before.
Well, if we can
based on
schedule Julie, I think that'd be
studies, so,
incredibly
yeah.
helpful. Yeah, she's great.
We'll get
Thank
that
you, Rusty.
done.
If I may, real quick, just clarify one comment that I overheard. I just want to make sure everybody understands that 2025 for the BAS system there at the bottom, that is just for the jail. And then 2026, 2027 is for, a bunch of other facilities, bundle.
All at the 525 campus, though, right? All of that, is that it's a core.
Not necessarily. It includes the extension office, it includes, forensic science. It includes the voting warehouse, Sheriff P&E down in Stillwell.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about Commissioner Dennis's question, because it would be great to have a separate document, one-sheeter, that shows by department total budget, but even that project is so split between so many entities, it
Oh,
just
yeah.
gets difficult.
Well, I've also seen Lindsay fan herself and go adjust the thermostat, so I want to make sure you still have that flexibility if we do something
Well,
like this.
we're leased here.
Okay, good.
So it's fine. It was one of my favorite parts of moving here. I can control my thermostat in my office. Okay, next slide. We're still on category 1. So we're still talking $25. So don't freak out on me when you see the bottom line dollar, because 20 million of that is bond funded. So the first one listed here, replacement of the jail annex boiler, water heater, and storage tank, is another one that has been on the list. You have seen this before. And what it does is it replaces a 1987 comfort heater boiler, pump station, domestic hot water heater that was put in 2017, a hot water storage tank from 2006, and it replaces recirculating pumps. And so they do need to have an ability to regulate the temperatures because it's the jail annex, so it's a 24/7 facility. So this is a project, again, not a huge price tag, and it continues to be funded in 2025 as was planned last year. Next is the adult detention facility kitchen restoration. You'll note that it's got 2 asterisks next to it. That is because we intend for it to be bond funded. We intend to package it with a number of other projects that have already been done for the adult detention facility, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation. Now this is one that's new this year, but there were pictures provided. I was able to go to the jail and see what this looks like. There's quite a bit of rust that's around. There are some spots where it looks like there's mold, though it's probably not mold, it's remediated, but it still has an appearance of that way. It would remodel, do ceiling paint, replace flooring, replace hollow metal frames. It would do the lighting and electrical jobs for new equipment. It would replace the sanitary sewer lines. It would put in new exhaust fans and ducts and all of those things. This is again where I said, why is this not an operational cost? Why is this a capital improvement project? It is because it is so much of that core function in the kitchen that makes this a capital improvement project. Again, the total cost would be $1.1 million. We would intend to bond fund it, so we wouldn't actually start paying on this until the following year. But it is work that we do believe is urgently needed. Next on the list is another project. It's Public Works Salt Storage Building at the East Yard. You'll see that it's also got the 2 asterisks. This is another one that we intend to bond fund. And because of conversations with our bond counsel and our municipal advisor, they have advised us to take a little bit of a different approach in how we plan for these. So we're putting design costs in year 1, construction costs in year 2, and year 2 is when we actually plan to do the debt issuance. So what you see here is the fact that we would begin the design phase in 2025 and then actually do the work in 26 and bond fund at that point. So we wouldn't actually start paying on it until 2027. Again, this is one that carried forward from last year. The next one is along that same vein. So last year, the commission heard a presentation on the Juvenile Community-Based Services Building that would essentially raise what we have today and construct a new facility generally in the same area. So the design cost was planned for in 2024 with a construction cost planned in 2025. So we're still in that design phase this year. And so that's why year 2 of this is here, even though the commission has not signed off on what a design would look like. It is year 2. It's a continuation of what was approved in last year's CIP. So that's why this is here. But again, you would see it's bond funded. So we wouldn't actually anticipate paying on this. So I don't believe a final design has been decided upon, right? So we're still in early stages of this, but we want to make sure to maintain and pull that forward from last year's CIP.
Lindsay?
Yes, sir.
This is one thing that I've had concerns about all along.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, we're going to tear down a perfectly good building and build another building. And nobody's ever shown me that that is absolutely necessary, to tear down a perfectly good building to build another one. So that's one of my concerns. But just on a higher level, this is sailing through, and it's 2/3 the cost of a new admin building.
Mm-hmm.
And that is stuck continuously. So I don't understand this commission where that we can't get moving on an admin building But we'll just sail through $20 million. So that's just a discussion.
Address the first question first, and then I don't know if we can address the second one, but Andrew, can you talk about the building?
So I will tell you that right now, the architect that's been hired is looking at two options. That is, one, keeping the existing building and trying to build around that. And then two is removing that building and building new. Last year when we explored this, the biggest issue or hurdle I think that we came upon was you basically have this single story gable roof. It's almost like it's a residential style roof with CMU walls, and when you have this facility in the middle of your two-story building, it makes some operational challenges with the structural walls that you're trying to work into new space and trying to make efficient, good use of the new building with this thing in the middle of it is very difficult. But we do have an architect that's exploring both options, and we can present those to you.
Rusty, I think it might be helpful to remind us what exactly is going over there, just so
Sure.
we're all on the same page.
So what this does is centralize the functions outside of JDF, Juvenile Field Services, Juvenile Residential Facility. This will expand the capacity of the Juvenile Residential Facility, which is an alternative to being locked up. DCF is also currently contracting with the county to house certain kids who can't go home, shouldn't be locked up. This provides a safe residential setting for them. The evening reporting program, juvenile probation, all of those functions will go in this building. There are kids that touch several of those programs, and so this gives them and their parents the opportunity to go to one location as opposed to going down to the juvenile court at that campus and then having to drive down to, currently they're located on Harry Street at the Harry Street Mall. So this centralizes, kind of makes a one-stop shop for all of that criminal justice and juvenile residential work and activity. All of those staff members are in the same place so that they can be used. They can be interchanged and used across programs at JDF, JIAC, and in Juvenile Field Services as needed. So that's what the concept is.
Are we settled entirely on conceptually what the programmatic use of this building would be, or is that still open for conversation?
Well, that's part of the design and open conversation. The intent was to get the architect on board, which we have. The preliminary kickoff meeting was scheduled and then delayed, I think, because the architect had some conflicts. The intent is to bring this conversation to this commission and potentially to some of the legislators in the South Central region to talk about what the concept is and what programs will go in there, and if that's going to meet the needs of kids in Sedgwick County and in the South Central region, because we are running some programs with state funding that are serving some of our counties around us. And so that conversation would be had as part of this preliminary design process to make sure we're getting the right programs into this building to meet the needs of the kids and the families, not just the kids, but the families. And then if everybody is in agreement and we think we've got the right programming in the building and we settle on a design, then that would move forward. And the commission obviously has the final say in all of this. So.
Okay. Thank you, Rusty.
I would like to add, home-based services currently does not have a home. It's been absorbed within the DOC offices. And then juvenile field services, they're getting kicked out of their lease at the end of this year. So we're temporarily planning on moving them downtown to the downtown campus at the Munger building. But without this, we don't have a permanent home for them.
Okay.
There are going to have to be some temporary modifications made to Munger in order to facilitate their presence there for however long that is, just so you know.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if this is the right time to debate this or not, but I think, is this the right time?
Yeah, absolutely.
So right now, just to be clear, JDF's not changing, correct? And JIAC's not changing,
Correct.
and juvenile court's not changing at all.
That's correct.
What we're changing right now is JRF and moving JFS. That's it.
And home-based services, right?
And home base and the evening reporting,
But
programming
but that's
that goes
part
along
of
with that.
JFS.
yes, those are programs
They're part
that,
of JFS. That's where those have been happening out of the Harry Street Mall. which is a rented, leased facility. And we've known for a while that was going to have to go away. And again, I'm not sure what the total cost of that facility cost was. And one of the arguments for this was staff efficiency and convenience, because you want to have a campus that rather than and I would argue, I'm not so sure that the campus setting for the community necessarily, for JDF, JIAC, and JDOC, or juvenile corrections, I should say juvenile court, if the campus setting does a whole lot of necessarily convenience for the community necessarily, and may have some impact on staff. There ought to be some type of break-even analysis. It talks about, okay, so if we don't do this, you have to have a few more people on staff because we're not closely located to each other. There's going to be an additional cost, but what is that cost? And is there some type of break-even point? I agree with Commissioner Dennis. This kind of came out of nowhere. It had my opinion, had very little scrutiny on our side. I think it's a great, thing, but it is $20 million. And I hate to bring this up, but goodness sakes. And by the way, the juvenile residential facility, JRF, we're talking about 30 days roughly. We're not talking about long-term, like 6 months. 30 days roughly. Or there'll be, and that's been there since that's been there a very long time, even before we had the debate about JRBR. JRF has been there even before that. So if you have any short-term residential, like 30 days or less, then that's JRF has always been the option. One other thing is JDF, I think, is underutilized, correct? We're not really using the entire facility. It's underutilized.
Currently, the facility is full because we've got other programming in there. We've got the evening reporting program and others. And beds that are available are being used right now. If they expand to 24, we would expect that the court would utilize that. But currently, they're limited on what they can house there based on the evening reporting program and others being in the building.
All right, so.
And we can have Steve come back in, Steve and Mario come in and brief this commission again.
I think a year ago when we sat here, we talked about this project.
We've
And
had a couple
Stonehouse
of
came
meetings.
in and had diagrams and showed diagrams. The commission was briefed. I'm a little, if we need to push pause button on this, then we'll push pause button. But we can bring Steve and Mario back in and brief this again, so commission's refreshed on this. But that was
We had 2 formal presentations with Steve and facilities presenting commission on this. And that's how it got into the CIP.
Yeah.
And has gotten to this point, is that there were 2 formal presentations and a general nod to.
With all due respect, though, we didn't vote on that. We simply was an informational briefing. You said, here's what we plan to do. And now it's going forward.
It was in the
Voted on the
CIP that you
CIP.
approved last year, and the design cost was in for 2024. So it was authorized.
Well, I don't think I was supportive of that. So again, here we are. It's moving forward. I can tell you right now, this is a big enough price tag. This is going to cause me a problem. And I agree with Commissioner Dennis. We have practically gone to blows over admin building costs. This is a huge price tag. I'm not convinced this is the right direction for Sedgwick County. If we focus on the real needs, I believe JRF potentially has options to be fixed. And I think JFS needs to have its own home. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of JRF. It could be, but JFS needs to have a home. I don't think Munger's is not the right answer for JFS. I think this has been a football that frankly has landed in the wrong spot. We need to find a real solution for JFS, and that's not it. And home-based services should be attached to JFS, and it should be in a better location. I don't even like hydraulic location for JFS anyway. It's the wrong location. And Munger's even worse. So I think our plan is flawed. The idea we're going to put JFS on, basically just east of Harry Street between Lincoln and Kellogg or in that area is just not the right location for JFS. I think it's wrong. I think our plan is flawed. It may be better for our staff, but it's not good for the people we're serving. And I'm going to be opposed to this because I think we can do better than that. Thanks.
So would it be helpful to have a follow-up conversation or
Look,
just pause?
if you recall, I've had concerns about this since the very first briefing.
Yep, I remember you talked about the retreat
I'll
too.
still have concerns about it.
I
Just
go ahead, Rustin.
corrections had come in looking for solutions in previous years. They came in with a CIP, over $1 million plus HVAC, which was, I don't know what the cost of that was. It was somewhere around $2 million to fix the HVAC, modernize the HVAC the way it should be, and then another $1.2 million or $1.3 million to do some very basic work on JRF to get it to where safety concerns and usability for conferences with social workers and things like that can be done in a private setting because it's not conducive currently. That sat in the CIP for 2 or 3 years and didn't get approved. Then Harry Street started falling apart. The owner down there wanted to work with WSU and expand their footprint down there. And so we've slowly phased out and done temporary things in order to house those programs to accommodate his future moves. If it's decided that JFS should not be on the campus down there, that juvenile court's in the right place, but JFS would be in the wrong place if it was down there. If that's the decision, then we need to look for another long-term lease, I suppose, or some other solution, and then we need to look at what we're going to spend on JRF to get it rehabilitated to a point that it's functional and useful for the staff and the kids. And so I guess we'll probably have to put them in Munger temporarily, JFS and Munger temporarily while we work through those solutions if this is not viable in the long run. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
When I'm looking at spending taxpayers' money on something, and I look at $20 million, that's a big chunk of money. And if I rack that up against, I think our highest priority is get an admin building, get us out of here where we're not spending $1 million a year on rent as soon as we can't spend it on the ARPA money. So if I was going to say, let's get some money going for something that's important, I'd spend it on an admin building long before I'd spend it on something where we've already got a facility and we're going to tear it down.
Yeah, I think we're due for obviously a follow-up conversation. So it's clear everybody's stating kind of their views on it. If we can find a better deal than 20 million, I certainly would love that. And if we can even repurpose the building in a way and expand it in a way, I'm all for looking at that too. I'm actually more concerned about, and not concerned may not be the right word choice, I'm more interested in the programs that are going to be happening there and making sure we're doing more there for kids, because the cost to this community of what's happening in a failing juvenile system is something that I don't know we're fully comprehending. I mean, it's a significant challenge that we have in this community with juveniles and the trajectory of where we're heading. And it's going to be a significant cost to corrections and the adult facility and all of it if we don't right this ship. So I'm actually more concerned, not as much about the brick and mortar. I'm more concerned about the services and the programs, which is why we've been meeting with the state, and Stephen Owens and the chair of his committee, and they're working hard to try to get more money to support some of the things we're doing. So I want to expand the conversation in services and programs, in my opinion, even more so than brick and mortar. But
Correction staff spent time going to other jurisdictions, and number one, we're the biggest in the state, generally speaking, in the things that we do. But they've gone and looked at other jurisdictions and the facilities they have and the way that they're delivering services. They've listened to their constituents saying that whatever we do and whatever we create in order to provide these services, it should be designed in a way that is conducive to rehabilitation, all of the evidence-based strategies and designs that the other facilities that we've looked at in the state have. So they came forward with something that is based on standards in their industry and what peer organizations are doing and what families and what juvenile constituents and advocates ask for. If we need to apply those same principles in a different type of facility that's more affordable, that's the will of the commission. That's what we'll do. But we need to bring our correction staff in and talk through it with them.
Senate Bill 367 passed in 2016, and as a consequence, they're sitting on about $100 million now. They've already tried to sweep the money once. Thankfully, Stephen Owens and some others got the money put back in the juvenile home-based services funding, if you will. But there's $100 million sitting there. And again, we're 1/6 of the state's population. I think we ought to maybe ask the state for some help in this area. This is a big burden, if you will, for taxpayers here. And I think that money is intended, again, that Senate Bill 367 was intended to have more efficiencies, but the savings was supposed to be reinvested back into those communities. And they've not done that. We're still sitting there waiting for them to turn loose that money. And there appears to be no plan. So I don't know what's going to happen down the road, but if we don't deal with that $100 million, we know what's going to happen. It's going to get swept. And right now the state's flush with cash, but when they're short on money, that's where that money's going to go. Mm-hmm. We have an opportunity right now, I think, to make a strong argument. If we want something on our legislative platform, again, similar to that homeless discussion last year, but this is Sedgwick County, and they're sitting on cash, waiting to be invested somehow. I think we ought to be making the argument that they ought to be part of this discussion.
And I see three ways forward on this. You can bring Stonehouse and the gang back in to talk through this in a staff setting. I'd rather push it to a meeting. We clearly have a split here. I'd rather push this to a vote, and we can't do that in the staff meeting. So I'm thinking special meeting where you guys have the authority to vote. We're going to need direction forward on this because we're going down a path right now that I think we're going to have to pause. Or we do it in a regular BOCC meeting. I guess whatever the will of the board is. I'd prefer special meeting on this. It's a big enough topic. It's complex. Probably should be separated away from another agenda. We have the discussion, we have the presentations, and at the end of that, you have authority to vote then, because we're going to need a way forward as a staff.
We need a way of voting for it, not just in the CIP, because it's buried in the CIP, and it just kind of flows through because we vote on the whole CIP at one time. And I don't want to vote against the entire CIP.
Thank you.
Yeah, we try to have a synergy on the budget and the CIP budget. And if this is the holdup of that synergy, then I think it's worth addressing separately, to your point. Special meeting?
Oh, I think, why don't we do this? Why don't we get Mario and Steve in on a staff meeting as quick as can, and then we can make some decisions there. So 24 CIP was $2,066,000, and that went towards
Design only.
That was design only. So that's what we had in 24 CIP for this was the $2 million. So
let me ask the technical question on that. Where are we at on that? We've hired an architect. Has he done work yet?
Yes, right now.
We've
correct.
encumbered expenses. Yeah, we need to, if we're going to pivot on this, we better pivot. We'll do the staff, Chairman.
Okay.
But unfortunately in a staff, it becomes trying to read the room, and sometimes it kind of has to come down to a vote on a way forward.
So could we maybe have the budget adopted? A budget adoption is August 21st. I just confirmed that with Maureen. Could we maybe schedule this for a vote on August 14th? So we know whether to include it in the recommended budget or not? And that gives us time to work through it.
I would respectfully ask much sooner, because if we're trying to figure out $20 million, that yay or nay determines what we can do with some other areas.
Okay.
This is bond funded, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll set staff up.
Thanks.
Okay. Keep going. But we can certainly come back to anything at any point in time. Okay, so adult detention facility domestic water heater replacement. This is another one that was phased over 3 years. We've already started with year one in 2024. These are the remainders of the project. So there's 6 total that are being replaced. 2 are from 97, 2 are from 2009, one's from 05, and one's from 2012. So they're in the kitchen, the laundry, and showers and restrooms. So again, some things that have aged out, and we're just trying to do some preventive maintenance to make sure they don't fail. Next is EMS access control at 18 facilities, so all posts plus their main building. And basically what it would allow is essentially what we all have here, which is proxy card access. That makes it much easier to control who has access to their facilities, which we all know is a concern, especially as folks separate from the organization and maybe continue to have a key if they don't turn it in. and then would potentially have access to space that's not always monitored. So we felt like this is a high priority need and more urgent need. There are a couple other EMS things that'll come up that are less urgent, but we thought this one, as a CIP committee, had some urgency to it. And then the final Category 1 project that we are here to talk about today is the Historic Courthouse Data Center Equipment Refresh. This is year 2 that's presented here. We're already doing some of that work this year. And so basically, I understand why people may think that this is weird to have in a CIP, but it's actually the air handler units and the environmental equipment that's used in the historic courthouse to control all of the equipment and things, or climate control the equipment that Mike has housed there. And we know how important it is to keep that modulated and up and running for all of us. So this would just be the second year of funding for that project. Yes, sir.
Is this the equipment that's sitting between the historic courthouse and Munger? Is that all that stuff that's blowing all the time every time I walk by?
That's part of it. Yeah, those are the condenser units for the air handlers that are inside.
Well, let me ask you a question, because Munger's sitting there empty, and yet we're running all this equipment because it has to also run historic courthouse. Is there any way of splitting that if we ever decide to do something different, like sell Munger or do something beyond that? But right now we can't do anything because it's all tied together.
Yes, to answer your question, we can split it. The cost, I think, would be significant to do something to that effect.
Well, what's the cost of running something for a building that's sitting empty?
All the equipment that's at Munger is running historic courthouse and Munger. We have the ability with Metasys, the building automation system that is also a CIP on here that we talked about on the previous slide. With that software, we have the ability to basically scale back Munger, so we're not heating or cooling it to a comfortable climate. We're keeping it between parameters, something to the effect of 60 to 80 degrees. So we have that ability to try to gain those efficiencies with that software program. But to answer your question, yes, we could split it off, but I think it would have a significant cost to do something to that effect.
Well, I'd be interested in what the cost is, because I don't know what our future is for Munger. And why are we keeping buildings that we don't have a use for? If we wanted to sell them, there's no possibility of selling it if it's all tied together with historic courthouse.
I think the other issue that we have with historic courthouse is it's on the historic registry. So any modifications that we do there, we're going to have to pass. And adding exterior air chillers, DX units, things of that nature are going to be problematic to try to get passed through them. So we'd be basically building out space within historic courthouse and taking it to an exterior location of some point on the grounds to have that sort of equipment. So we'd have to find another location and get it passed. And my recollection is that the grounds are on historic registry as well, but I'd have to verify that. So
you're telling me we can never sell Munger?
It's going to be difficult to sell one without the other.
Lynn, on the salt storage building on the East Yard, did we spend any money in '24 on that? Okay.
No, we did not.
Oh, and is that bonded? So it's not bonded yet, but
No.
your asterisks say it would be bonded.
Right. The goal would be in 2025 to start the design, to do the work in 2025, and then we would bond when the work is complete.
Okay, let's just make a note that there's a lot of, I'm involved out there at WSU Tech and with the airport authority a lot. And they're opening up the east side of Jabera, of which we, in the road, and there are property owners around there as well that are becoming very aggressive in accessing into the east side. And one of them has asked me if we'd ever consider possibly moving it or relocating it, or maybe they could help us relocate it. So before we, except I don't know the urgency that you need it, but
No,
why
but
don't
I
we
will
just-
note that that is our north yard up there, not our east yard. Our east yard is actually located off of Webb Road down south.
Thank you. then, okay. We're good. So I'm not.
So
all right,
this one
I
is
didn't
at
want-
the east yard, but we want to talk about stuff at the north yard.
Yeah.
Potentially moving it.
Yeah, so that's, thank you for clarifying. So, but let's, on our to-do list.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And I would note, commissioners, for this final project, the historic courthouse data center, it is replacing an air handler unit, it's replacing the uninterruptible power supply, and then power distribution units. So I think it's more than just those units that we hear outside, you're right, that are very, very loud when we walk over there. But there's a lot in terms of just maintaining our data center. So I think even if we were to ever relocate, those would have to be necessary components wherever we are.
If I may, Mike, you might correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe even though the title says historic data center, we are also doing the data center at public safety, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I am ready to move to category 2 if you are. Hoorah, okay. So again, color coded, this is your lovely blue section on your corresponding table. So what you'll notice here is that we have a couple of parks projects, but many of the ones that you have seen in the past, actually that would have been shown here typically are moved to the watch list, and that is because of what Tanya and Aaron discussed the other day in the parks presentation, and that is the idea and a concept of doing a master plan and then coming back. But some of these are more urgent than others, and want to make sure that parks get some attention through this process. So the playground structure that's out at Lake Afton Park is old and hard to keep up, and the manufacturer is no longer in business, which makes it an even bigger deal. So the structure is still usable, but not as much as it could be. And also the new project would be ADA compliant and would introduce those elements. So this is some cash. Again, we're talking about 2026 right now, so this is more of a planning horizon and a communication to the public. This isn't actually approving that work to be done until we come to a 2026 budget. So just to clarify that. Next would be it says replace 3 floating,
Is $250,000 for the playground more important than all those bathrooms that are in absolute terrible shape?
So the bathrooms have been done. The east yard the east and west restrooms have been funded and done, correct?
I don't think they've been done. They're to be done this year.
Okay.
And we're going to try to do it this fall so that we can try to have a contractor bid on both of those and try to obtain better pricing. So we're going to put that out this fall at Lake Afton Park, if that's what you're referring to.
So they're taken care of?
Yes,
Yes.
they were in last
They will be
year's,
taken care
the
of.
last 2 years CIPs. Okay, so next I probably need to change this language. Instead of replacing 3 floating docks at Sedgwick County Park, it's going to be adding them. The ones that were kind of in bad shape have already been taken down. So what this would do is go in and add those docks so that folks who are out there have the ability at Sedgwick County Park to begin to use that. And it would be phased so that there would be 2 in year 1 and then another one in year 3. And so again, this is making sure that even though there's a master plan that we're hoping that the commission will consider allowing to be done, this gets some attention to both parks within this CIP. Next.
Lindsay, can I just, those first 2 items, I'm probably risking getting written up about, but, so, grew up going to Lake Afton a lot, and beach, water ski. We never went to Lake Afton to be on a playground. And I guess a playground, that's a sizable amount of money for a playground. And then it takes maintenance every year and blah, blah, blah. I mean, is that really a need that we even, would we better be served for the taxpayer money and even the people that go there if we just eliminated that playground altogether and gone on with life? I'm just throwing that out there.
I'm going to defer to Tanya on the necessariness of this.
Well, I mean, there are families that go out at Lake Afton Park.
I know.
And the only thing that I can say is it's being funded in 2026. The master plan is being addressed in 2025. So
Okay.
it's not as if we're,
All right.
we're funding it next year. And we can certainly look to the master plan to see how we could address the playground for that to be funded. So
Okay.
if that
Maybe more-
makes you feel any
Yeah,
better.
more permanent berms or running around areas, or I don't know. But then the second one, again, I totally respect the estimates, but we built some docks down at Grand Lake, and you can have a heck of a dock for $50,000. And the amount of money for 3 docks, floating docks on that, I guess I just would like to justify it to the public that $450,000 for 3 docks is, because there's a lot of boat people in this area that know a lot about docks, and that's going to be a Taj Mahal of docks if that's.
I
what
know
it-
that CIP has been on there for quite some time, so there's been some inflation that's occurred naturally within our own documents. So we can certainly revisit that, but I think I'm going to defer back to what Tanya said, and we'll kind of wait to see what the master plan identifies, and then if we have
Okay.
docks or things of that nature, we'll price things out.
I think
then.
that's responsible. I'm not necessarily against it. I mean, it sounds like I am as much as I just want to justify it. No, we're doing the right thing. So.
Let me follow up with Commissioner Meitzner. You know, we pulled those docks out because they were old wooden, junky docks, and they were a safety hazard to anybody that got on them. But I'm not sure. I agree with Commissioner Meitzner that $450,000 to replace those docks is one heck of a lot of money.
So we do use these in our forecast estimates. So if the commission, and it would be a use of cash, so if the commission would like, we can move these to the watch list until we get some revised figures and come back next year with some updated numbers. And that way it would not show in your financial forecast, if that would be a compromise.
Yeah, I think, Tanya, I agree that the master plan is where we need to go and figure out what we need to do, and find out if $450,000 for 3 docks is the appropriate type of docks, or can we get by with something a little bit cheaper? Because really, they're fishing docks. You know, we don't pull boats up to them. People walk out on them and fish, and so
They don't have a boat lift?
there's no boat lift on them. You know, I can't believe that it's that expensive when we're not lifting boats up, we're not doing anything special, we're just walking out on them. Thank you.
We'll put them on the watch list.
And if I recall, I don't know if we were going back with wood. I think the request was for an all aluminum dock that was ADA compliant, so it added some cost there too. But we can revisit all that.
I agree. An aluminum dock would be better because the wooden docks we pulled out, they deteriorated very rapidly, and they were going to be a continuous maintenance hassle if we put wooden docks back in. But even aluminum docks, I can't believe they're that much.
They would have a 50-year life expectancy, so that is a pretty good return on it. But anyway.
So the
okay.
agreement is to move it to watch list,
Move them both to
and
watch
then we're going to
list.
wait for the master plan to give
Yes.
us.
And that actually will then free up enough cash in your forecast to allocate toward a master plan instead, without having an impact to your forecast. So it's a good compromise.
Have we approved the master plan funding at this point?
You would do that through your 2025 budget. That was a decision
I'd like
package.
to have more
but-
details about that, but I'll go ahead and write me up. I'm not in favor of these 2 right now. Thank you.
Okay,
Writing you up. You're both getting written up today.
that's right, big trouble. Sheena, get me the forms. Okay, next. We have regressed, so we're going to get back on track. Public Works open face vehicle storage building at 3 yards. So essentially, there would be an additional vehicle storage building added to the Public Works yards at Andale, Clonmel, and the North Yard, potentially tabled based on the conversation that could happen about relocating that site. And the idea is that it would extend the life of the vehicles that are parked under there, some of that bigger equipment that takes the brunt of the storms and the weather. And so you can see that those are phased out 1 per year, and that would be, again, cash funded. But that is the estimate.
I I understand the need for these, but it concerns me about being open-faced because we have vehicles being broken into out there we got a fence around them, but if you can't secure the buildings, how do we protect those, Lynn?
We have, depending on the location of the yard, we struggle with security, whether they're inside the building or not. Most of the thefts have resulted in breaking in not just through our outer perimeter gates, but also into our buildings. It's once they're inside and they get to a back area where they're a little more secluded, even with the addition lately of security cameras, that's where they're able to pretty much bulldoze into our facilities and get what they are. So the open face buildings have been are more of a cost consideration. They protect us for the primary reason of getting it out of the weather, getting it into an area where we can light it up and work on them and store them without the full cost of the garage and the continual maintenance of having garage doors and frontages on them. Yes, it would be a nice additional security feature, but I'm not sure it would make up for the maintenance costs of having the garage doors.
Well, when you're putting $1 million pieces of equipment in there, it concerns me that they're just have a little fence around them, and that's about it.
The one thing we have done is added security features themselves to the vehicles, security features to the vehicles themselves that have made it a little more difficult for vandals as well as those who are looking to steal the equipment.
You said there was Andale, Clonmel, what was the third one?
North yard.
The North Yard. The one that Pete was talking about earlier.
Right, that we could relocate. And so that would likely be your 2028, I guess, depending on how quickly we get a plan in
So
place.
that is a fenced that's a fenced yard, and so security is not the main concern here. It's just really protection from the weather.
Correct. And like Lynn said, getting a space that can be lit up so they can work on those pieces of equipment outside of the elements when needed.
When you say the word Andale and Clonmel, are we talking about county works yard, county?
Public Works yards.
Correct. We have 5 maintenance yards.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, the next project is the main courthouse perimeter security. And so that is essentially, in my very simplified view of looking at the world, essentially getting bollards put up around the perimeter of our main courthouse to essentially be able to deter anyone from driving into that facility. And that didn't used to mean as much to me until the truck hit the arena a couple years ago. And now that facility has put those in place. It's a very expensive and very timely process to fix it when someone does that. Next, EMS video surveillance at 17 posts. I said there would be other EMS projects, and there is a consideration to get some video surveillance put out there again for security at all of the various posts. But we thought it was more urgent to get the access controls in place to control access to those facilities. But it would be cameras and a monitoring system. Again, I think that would go into that larger conversation we had the other day about that security specialist position and someone who's actually responsible.
Are we
for
having
monitoring and-
theft or break-in issues at EMS posts? And they're 24 hours a
I
day?
don't
They're
know
not there
that we have
most of the time, but
a ton of those
Okay.
today, but I think it's more the concern of vandalism to cars, making sure that
Okay.
that EMS workers are safe coming in and out of the facility, especially since they're 24/7 operations. And then obviously we know that we store drugs in those facilities, and we want to make sure that there's good accountability and good tracking.
very good. Good, makes sense.
All of that.
Thank you.
And then the final one, adult detention facility laundry equipment replacement. This is another one where an on-site review was required to determine if this really rose to the level of CIP. These are massive industrial pieces of equipment. If you've ever seen the Monk episode where he gets stuck in jail, that is literally what you're looking at. He hides in the dryer. It's huge. I mean, it's just a massive piece of equipment. These things have been in there since the laundry was built in 1987. Think about your washer and dryer at home. Mine survives a few years. 2 of the 5 dryers work right now, and 2 of the 5 washers work right now. So the idea would be to bring a crane in to get the old pieces of equipment out, and then to get new functioning equipment in to help process the linens. I don't even want to know, towels and uniforms for up to 1,500 inmates on a daily basis. And we've heard some horror stories of how the inmates handle those things in the facility. So, a true need. So, because the kitchen was more important. We only have so much money, sir. You sound like Andrew. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Getting a little ahead of yourself there, sir. Okay, we're going to stay on focus because we still got a lot of stuff to get through. So, and we're only on part 2 of category 2. So, adult detention facility generator parallel switchgear modernization. So there are 4 generators at the adult detention facility, 2 on the north side and 2 on the south. And on those 2 north generators, when a power outage occurs, the generators are supposed to come on and synchronize with each other. But this equipment is what manages that. And if it goes down, then that means that those other generators have to carry the load. And obviously that becomes a challenge because if that power goes out and we're not able to control master control, which controls the doors and the security for everything that happens in the jail, if they're not able to keep their air conditioning or heat on, then that becomes an issue of liability potentially for making sure that we're treating inmates humanely, and all of those things. And so making sure that our backup power can work when it's supposed to is the purpose of this project. It is your final project that's funded in the 2026 year of Category 2. So then moving to...
Lindsay?
Yes, sir.
First of all, I thought we just replaced this stuff here a couple of years ago. What were we doing with the generators then?
So a few years ago, we did replace the generators, and we actually eliminated the switchgear on the 2 south generators. This addresses the switchgear on the 2 north generators. And one clarification I want to make is the 2 south generators only supply enough power for the south portion of the jail. The 2 north generators only supply power for the north end of the jail. So Lindsay was right. The switchgear is the equipment that controls the 2 generators, synchronizes them together so they're putting out the same voltage, same frequency.
But that was what we were doing before, wasn't it?
And that's what we're doing before, yes. But that's what we do on the south end for those 2 generators. We have the switchgear on the north end for 2 other generators that are completely separate from the south end. So now we need to modernize the 2 north end.
So we're not doing 4,
We're not doing 4.
doing the other 2 that we
Correct.
didn't do the first time.
Correct. And
And
we,
it's not the generators, correct?
it's not, this is not the generators, this is just the
I
switchgear.
understand that.
And we will evaluate. I need to go back and make sure that we don't need to be addressing the generators at the same time, or whether or not there's not newer technology to where it wouldn't be cost effective for us to eliminate the switchgear on the north end, similar like we did on the south end, and the generators themselves. New generators have the controls built onto them, so you don't have to have this third piece of equipment to synchronize them.
Okay, well, I just remembered we did something with the switchgear.
We did, and then we also have the switchgear that we're modernizing at public safety. Similar scenario where the parts are obsolete, so if something breaks, we don't have backup power.
And if I would have just read all of the notes that Andrew sent me, I would have addressed all of that. So I'm sorry, Andrew. That's what I get for trying to sound smart. Okay. The next project in 2027 is replacing HVAC at a few EMS facilities. It's not a huge dollar amount based on the facilities that are done now. They've done an evaluation to determine the others are okay for now and can be monitored, but over time this project could fluctuate. It could potentially be one that moves into a preventive maintenance type line going forward, but for now there's just a few posts that need that to happen, 2, 4, and 6. And then the next is our sheriff firing range, foundation repair. You all have heard about this, I think, a couple of times now. It continues to be in an outer year What it would do is install 66 steel piers adjacent to the failing foundation to reset it to its original specs. The main facility would include 44 of those, and then the tower itself would have 22. So, something that needs to happen, but maybe isn't as urgent. And then the final project on this list is something that came up last year. It was placed on the watch list because at that time there was actually conversation about whether the appraiser would move into an admin building. Or whether potentially row offices would go to the Ronald Reagan facility. But this would selectively demolish and rebuild walls in the two areas associated with the current appraiser suite that would accommodate their new staff and also allow better functionality for the change in operations that Mark has described to you. So moving to category 3, these are projects that we believe need to be done, but they have the lowest sense of urgency. And so you'll see these are in the final 2 years of the plan. The first is shower replacements at the adult residential facility. It would replace 24 of the 27 shower stalls along with all of the controls and shower heads, rods, and curtains. It would repair the tile in the grout and refinish the shower benches. And it would also involve some major plumbing. So it has had 23 years of daily use and is in need of a refresh. So again, not as urgent as some of the other projects we've talked about, but certainly a need. Next would be the main courthouse employee turnstiles and access control. So we all know that when we worked at the main courthouse, you could come through the front and scan your access control as an employee to avoid going through security. In the back, you would scan your proxy card and come through. But it all depended on someone being able to physically watch that you have scanned and done that. And so if someone's attention is diverted or if they're helping maybe a customer who's come into the courthouse, there is potential for someone to just walk right through. And so what this would do is put in turnstiles and access controls that are similar to what the city of Wichita has today. It would allow there to be some controls of when you swipe your badge, you have a certain amount of time, and there's some sensors that determine when you go through. It would also, if you're in a wheelchair or something like that, it would be smart enough to understand that, but it would allow there to be much greater control and security added into that facility. Next is the ADA facility evaluation report. So back in 2010, there was a comprehensive analysis done at that time to determine the status of county facilities with regard to the ADA. Those issues have been addressed, but we know that since that time, there's likely some that were missed or have been added, especially with all of the facilities that we have. And so the idea would be to go back through and do another refresh and identify any additional work that is necessary to ensure that we remain compliant with ADA and reduce our long-term risk or liability on that front. The next item is extension office updates. This is another one that carried forward from last year that is funded in outer years because there is not as much urgency. It is our facility. It is used by the Extension Council. It would update the finishes in the 4-H hallway and update public restrooms because those are original to the building that was built in 1993. And it would also update the finishes and provide efficient water and lighting fixtures. So it is another one that's phased. Actually, it begins here in 2028 and has some dollars in 29, but I believe in the notes we actually say it would go into 2030 as well. You just don't see that listed here. And then the final project, we're talking about funding, congratulations, you've made it, is the clear and grubbing of FEMA parcels. So the county has 24 FEMA parcels that we own that can't be really given away. No other community wants to take them from us, darn it. And they have become overgrown places for parties and things, illicit activities that we wish wouldn't happen and that the neighbors certainly don't like. So the idea would be to go in and remove the scrub trees, the shrubbery, level the dirt mounds, and clear and reduce the fire hazards. That would allow there to be kind of a nice, flat, clear, direct line of sight. So something that needs to be done, not as urgent, but something that we can't ignore because it is our property. So, yes, sir.
This is 5 years away, and I just got a complaint the other day about one of the facilities, and that's what I learned from talking with Tanya, that we got 24 of these things out there. So what are we doing for the next 4 years?
Let them
Well,
keep
we're not
growing.
doing anything.
I
We're just
don't know.
making it worse.
Yeah. It's just not a priority compared to everything else that we're talking about. It's just not a priority.
Basically, we don't have the staff. Between us and Public Works, we've gone back and forth on what we can do with these parcels. This is to put something on the CIP, bring awareness to the issues that we're having. We'd like to, what this proposes is basically making it to where we can mow the parcels. But then we have to talk about who's going to mow it, what equipment they're going to use, have those future conversations. Yes, so basically what
The
this
first
does
stage.
is, I mean, at a very high level, we got a price per acre for somebody to bring a dozer out and level some ground. And that's at a high level, that's what this is.
But these are all over the county. It's not like it's in
Well,
a nice, neat.
To interject, would you mind sending out a list of where these are? I mean, I haven't. I mean,
And I can tell you there are, the majority of these are in Mulvane. We've got a couple in Wichita, I think one in Viola and one in Sedgwick. So
okay.
Okay, so we'll get that list to you. Okay, so now we're going to move, and I'm going to quickly cover these. These are our watch list projects. You can see that these are all listed on this sheet here with the dollar amounts associated with each. You'll see that there are no dollars across the bottom, again, because we're not planning to fund them, but the specific dollars are listed here in the slides, and then there's a grand total on the second one. Now, I can cover these if you would like.
That I'm interested in is the EMS garage facility. And remember, we're getting 2 big garages out at the election office. So is this something that we can use for that and forget about almost $2 million?
So we've had that conversation, and I'm going to see if Rusty has any comments he wants to make. But right now, EMS does not consider that a good fit for them because of operational inefficiencies that come about. So I think there still needs to be.
That doesn't make sense. That's big words that doesn't say anything.
They believe that they need to have their ambulances located on Stillwell so that when they have an ambulance that goes out of service and has to go to the shop, they want to be able to pick up their spare ambulance from that site, not have to have somebody go all the way out northeast to pick up an ambulance and get back to their location. It takes them out of service
So that one
for a
person
lot
driving
more
out there
time.
and back is worth $2 million to me.
I think the idea is that it is you're actively taking posts off the street that are now not able to respond to someone, and they believe that has true patient impact. And so I will defer to Rusty to speak to where we are in the conversation and negotiation with them about there's other things that could potentially move out there to free up space at Stillwell.
I'm not going to argue it. That's too far out in the future,
Okay.
but I can't see spending almost $2 million because of operational efficiency.
I think that's why the committee felt it was appropriate to put on a watch list, because I don't know that we're all bought into that either. But I think we want to continue to have that conversation and be respectful of EMS's needs, recognizing that there's a lot of other things happening too, and maybe we can appease everyone through some conversation. Yep. Rusty, anything have I said incorrectly?
No, I think the EMS director would need to come talk to the commissioners
Yeah.
on his own.
Okay. We'll set that up.
And if I could just say that regardless of EMS, but we do have those garages, so I assume that the CIP group is always aware of some department can use it.
Yes.
If not EMS.
That's part of the conversation we've had, is there are a lot of evolving needs. A lot of things that are fluctuating, especially with the elections, warehouse moving, what that frees up over there, if there's conversation about sheriff property and evidence and where that goes. And we've got an expansion of household hazardous waste that's happening. There's conversations
On
about
Stillwell.
the property that's
Yeah.
the property that's adjacent to the sheriff's squad room and how that can be best utilized. There's a ton of conversation that's happening, and I think this is our opportunity to step back and have space planning conversations.
I have a question on the next slide.
Okay, Next slide. Okay, we'll jump forward. Thank you for jumping forward.
You're welcome. Go one more.
Oh, wow, you really jumped through. Okay, let me
gotta
just
use the
here
restroom.
real quick. The only one I want to call your attention to is the Sedgwick County Park and Lake Afton Park camera surveillance. That's got a hefty price tag because of some trenching that would be necessary. We do think that that's going to be coming back before you probably more quickly than some of the others, but there just needs to be some additional evaluation on what possibilities are there to try and address the vandalism, trash dumping, and all of that stuff that's happening. So just FYI. Okay, now I'm with you.
Okay, so looking at facility drainage for 25, 29.5 million total. Looking at the 5-year, 54.4. What rules or guidance do you have in regards to debt policy with CIP? Can
We're going to get there.
Okay.
That's the final portion of our presentation
For me, I'll just
today.
tell you, my first year, I always had a hard time understanding what was or wasn't normal CIP funding in relation as a ratio to budget. And it's,
Well, I'm
well,
going
you
to.
don't have to
Well,
come
no,
to
I'm
that.
just going to jump ahead to show you
Okay.
that we're going to have that conversation.
Okay.
So don't you worry.
So there are hard,
It's-
fast rules that are in
Yes.
place. Okay.
And it's, and this is how we're planning to do that. You'll see that we only have bonding right now planned in 25 and 26 because of the type of projects we're talking about.
Understood.
Which is very depressing when you look at the fact that we're estimating of this 54 million, roughly 32.5 million is coming from cash.
Yeah.
And you'll remember right now that our revenue replacement is about 17 million on the high side. And so that means we have to come up with cash for this through other mechanisms. And we already know we're staring down a multi-million-dollar structural imbalance.
I do have a question on the comment that was made earlier in regards to an admin building. Why is that not a part of CIP?
It is. So I'm going to jump ahead again. Bear with me. Nobody look, or you're going to have, could be like a strobe light. You could have a seizure. So the slide that Commissioner Dennis asked us to add about what is in the current CIP plan, I'm going to point you to 2024 and 2026. The commission last year approved a CIP amendment that was right at $30-ish million. And so because you all took that action, that made it a formal part of the CIP already. So it's already in, at
Okay.
least to the extent that we have those dollars there. 28 million. It's already in. The idea would be that we would not have enough cash to float all of the projects that we have, so we would need to advance fund approximately half of that cost, which is why you see the first part in 2024. And then the idea would be, at least based on the conversation last year, what the commission approved last year.
I just didn't
we
see
would
that on the
complete-
list.
No, you're right.
Okay.
And that's why, because it was a CIP amendment
Understood.
last year.
Yep. Okay.
So,
That makes sense.
It has fluctuated through CIP in prior years. It's been on watch lists, it's been funded, it's been on watch lists
I've
and
noticed,
funded, and now it's a CIP amendment. So
Okay.
we are hopeful to have a conversation and decision on that in July of this year, just because this was already authorized. And then with the hope that if the commission chooses to move to a new admin building, whether that be brand new construction or remodel of an existing facility, that we could get that bond sale completed at the end of this year so that we have the cash available to start doing that work.
Very good.
Couple questions here. So when we vote on CIP, we're not voting on the watch list at all. Is that correct?
You're voting to essentially approve the watch list as is.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of questions on the watch list. Second of all, on that slide you just showed a minute ago, it did show 2.6 million already approved for post one.
That is what has been approved in a prior CIP. That's how it is in the bond and interest. We actually.
Chance to go back and revisit. And that was 2026.
We're gonna come back to that because yes, we do believe that we actually need to do that facility sooner. We're gonna bring it to you as a CIP amendment. I was gonna talk about it when we got to that slide, but we can talk about it now. There is some property that's been identified that's at a reasonable cost, we think, and so we want to bring you a CIP amendment pretty soon. I think Andrew is waiting for me to identify the funding for that. One of the things we would advocate for is that being revenue replacement instead of bond funding. That would be an opportunity to do that and get that project completed sooner rather than later because we do know there's.
So post one needs to change locations also.
Yes.
Okay. So just as a point of reference, again, post 15, once again, I just looked it up. the building structure was 800,000. And of course, that was a few years ago.
Right.
But even with inflation, we're probably talking less than $1 million for the structure plus land. I'm surprised that's still showing 2.6 million.
So the project itself, I think, is 2.2 million. It's just that it was aggregated with some other things. And we'll get to that when
Okay.
we get to that slide, I promise. But the amendment that you'll see will actually be for less cost than what's there. That's just what had been.
And again, on the watch list, it
Planned
shows
for
post four
earlier.
post four is 1.7 million. Once again,
Right.
is it changing locations? Post four.
It would not be because it's on land, I believe, that we already own.
I guess I'm curious how we get to 1.7. Again, it's on the watch list, so maybe that's
And
Not
we
what we're
can do
talking
that.
about
I
right
have
now,
some
but-
project sheets in here that I can show you that outline the various components of that
I'll
cost.
keep bringing it up again. Post 15 on Webb Road. Is it a bad building in some way?
I don't
not a
believe it
good
is.
building.
I know that they want more office space, than what they have, but other than that, I think they're using that as their model, right?
They're generally satisfied with the building. They want to increase the number of offices to 2 to accommodate floating supervisors or second crews. So they want to increase the square footage to add a second office.
It's 3,000 square feet currently, and it has at least one office now.
Correct.
So you want to add another office.
That's what they asked
So it's
for.
going to be 400 square feet more. So it's again that was $800,000, and we have in the watch list a 1.7 million for post 4. I want to know, are we not committed to doing the similar type of construction? Or are we going back to brick and mortar? What's the plan?
Same construction.
But, sir,
Same
I would
construction,
just,
but
I mean,
they've
our
adjusted for
inflation,
inflation.
yeah, the inflation has been off the charts.
The actual
That-
bid will determine
Okay.
where
All
we're
right.
actually at.
Let's
I'm gonna turn it
spend just
over to
10
Len.
more seconds on post 1. So post 1 has a different geographical location. It's going to move up. And there's land acquisition there that we want to move forward with quickly.
Correct.
And then post 1, the structure will be next year.
Correct.
Correct?
Well,
Okay.
it would be in 20. Go ahead, Andrew.
So I will shortly be submitting a CIP amendment for post 1, and we will have land acquisition, and then the CIP amendment is going to be for the total cost. It'll include land acquisition and building the post. So actual groundbreaking won't occur until next year, probably, by the time we buy the parcel and have construction documents ready for bidding and have a GC awarded. It'll probably be sometime in the winter.
Okay. Okay. We can either, I'm going to take a break. We can either continue on and we can just get up as we go, or if everybody needs a little refresh, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, let's do that. I think we do, Tom. Can we flip the switch, go?
Daniel up there wanting to tell us all about roads.
And there he is.
All right. Does it set the music?
So I'm gonna have Daniel Trent go ahead and give the road and bridge presentation this year, and we'll both stand for any questions you may have throughout it.
Welcome, Daniel.
All right, thank you. All right, this is going to be a presentation on the CIP for the road and bridge portion. I'm going to draw your attention to this handout that I passed out before the meeting. There's a column on the right for notes that shows which district the projects are in, and then it also has information on any significant changes to the projects or whether they are new projects to the CIP. The first half of that document are the bridge projects, and then there's a break there where it goes into the road projects. All right, so just a brief overview of the county infrastructure that we maintain. We have 603 miles of roads on our system. We're currently working through a bunch of annexations. We have agreements for 17.25 miles to be annexed by cities. That would include 13.8 of those miles coming off of our system. The rest of those miles are either going to be connecting links, so we would continue to maintain those roads, or they are township roads that are being annexed by the city, so that was never on our system to begin with. So 13.8 would come off of our system right now, but I have goals to keep going up from 17.25. We have 606 bridges. Of those, 33 are rated in poor condition. We have nearly 20 miles of pedestrian pathways, over 14,000 traffic signs and markers. We maintain 32 traffic signals. 13 of those are KDOT traffic signals that we maintain and we have an agreement on, and the other 19 are ours. And so all told, we have 1.66 million miles traveled per day on our system.
Can you tell me on the 603 miles, how much of that is gravel road?
We have 39 miles of gravel road.
Is that included in that 603?
Yes.
Yes. And how many of the bridges were poor condition, you said?
33 are in poor condition.
Thank you, that's all I have, thanks.
And that represents basically 5.5% of our system. Our goal is to keep that under 10%.
All right. So we've divided the CIP projects into 4 categories: maintenance, enhancements, expansions, and quality of place. I'll go quickly through those categories. So maintenance projects, that's obviously to maintain our system. That includes preventative maintenance and then replacement of infrastructure. That's what most of our bridge projects are, or all of our bridge projects are replacement or maintenance projects. So the big projects in here are R175, that's our road maintenance project, and then our bridges. Enhancements, this includes a variety of projects. This also includes any gravel roads that we are paving. We've put that in this category. Expansion projects are ones that create new routes or expand capacity. KDOT projects are in this category. And if ARC 95, that would be in this category if we got it into the CIP. And then we have quality of place. This includes 2 bicycle facility projects in the CIP. So the goals of the Public Works CIP program is to continue with our preventative maintenance on roads. That would be on a typically every 6 to 7 years we would come around to each of our roads for maintenance. And we're in the process of revising that timeline. It used to be 5 years and it was 6 years kind of on average. We're going more towards a process where we will do it on a needs-based. Not all roads are created equally. Some roads require more maintenance, so we are working on that. And then we have a goal of replacing or rehabbing 30,000 square feet of bridge deck per year. And that is based on a 75-year lifespan, typical for a bridge. All right, so some of the changes. First, we have increased funding for several projects to keep up with labor material costs. Again, that's in that right-hand column of that sheet that I passed out to you. I've indicated which projects have significant increases in costs. We've added 7 new bridge projects to the CIP. All 7 of those bridges are in poor condition currently. We've added 5 new road projects. None of those road projects would convert a gravel road to a paved road. We've pushed the Calfskin Creek watershed project. It was in 2026, and we have pushed that out to 2029, which is the last year in the 5-year CIP. The funding just hasn't materialized for that project, and so we have pushed that out, but it is still in the CIP. And then finally, partnerships will highlight a couple of projects that we're partnering with the City of Wichita and the City of Valley Center. That's B528 and R379, and I will talk about those in just a minute. All right. So that first category, maintaining the road system. Again, this is over a 5-year cycle, so this is not next year's numbers. This is over the next 5 years. First, R134, that's our right-of-way and utility relocation project. We have $1 million allocated for that. That is unchanged from the previous CIP that you approved. R175, that's our large preventive maintenance project. It has $55 million allocated to it. That covers a lot of the overlays that we do each year, crack seal. It's obviously a significant portion of our budget, and we are holding that constant at $55 million, $11 million per year. We did not increase that. And then finally, we've got the R264 drainage projects, $3.6 million. That project we did increase slightly. It was $3 million over a 5-year period in the previous CIP, and we've increased to 3.6. On the bridge system, I'll highlight a few projects here. First, the Seneca Bridge between Wichita and Hayesville is in the CIP. We are expecting at this point to receive funding from WAMPO for that project, and the amounts of that anticipated funding is included in the CIP. So we're anticipating $430,000 of that 1.87 would be in our budget. The rest would come from WAMPO. We have 29 bridge replacements in total in our CIP, totaling $27.73 million. B532, that is to reopen the closed bridge south of Cheney. We're looking at adding in $350,000 this year into the CIP, and we put that in year 2025. We're going to work through a consulting engineer to revise some plans and see if we can get that done. And then finally, B520 is our major maintenance CIP project, and we've kind of moved money around and increased that a little bit, but that has changed significantly from what it was before as well. Questions so far? Going fast, Lynn, just like you asked. Oh, yep, going back.
That 391st, is that the one that the farmer was complaining about that we took out and never replaced, or is this a different one?
That bridge. Well, that's the one down by Cheney. We had another one up by the Ark River that was separate.
Okay, so this is not the one.
That's not the one,
right
no.
off K96.
Correct, it is not.
Thanks.
Yeah, the one up by K96, there's no physical bridge in that location anymore. This one, the bridge is still there.
Well, there was.
Oh, yeah, it's been removed, though. All right. Enhancements to our road system. Highlight a few projects here. First, we have a project for shoulders on Ridge Road from 69th to 85th. This is kind of a sister project to a project that is fully funded now and no longer in next year's CIP. So this project would add shoulders north of the Arkansas River, and that is $2.4 million. We've added in this next project, MacArthur Safety Improvements, $460,000. We were recently notified that we were eligible for $1.6 million in FHWA funds for high-risk rural roads for that stretch. And so 460 would be our share of that, and the federal money would add 1.6 million to that project. The Calfskin Creek flood mitigation project, I indicated earlier that we pushed that out from 2026 to 2029. So that's significantly delayed. That is the movement of that project is what necessitated a lot of these projects on your sheets accelerating in their schedule. They left a $5 million hole in year 2026. So that's why you see a lot of projects advancing up in their schedule. It's to fill that $5 million. The Meridian and 93rd Street drainage project, that's also new this year. That has been an issue since I've been at the county. It preceded me at the county. There's now development going on up there inside the City Valley Center, so we're working with them to partially fund the drainage improvements that are going on in that area. And then the roundabout at 21st and 167th Street West, that is where we currently have the ICWS that is going in. We've had the roundabout in the CIP in the previous year, so we're keeping it in there. But I'll also point out that we're trying to go after some demonstration grant funding for that. And so that may affect when this roundabout could occur in the future. If we get a demonstration grant, we'll need to collect data. There will be a little bit of research. We'll get some reports and all that goes along with that. But for right now, we're keeping that in the CIP. Going on with more enhancements to the road system, we have a total of 5 reconstruction projects totaling $12.65 million. So those projects are all basically replacing cold mix roads or making improvements to the clear zone safety improvements, but those are currently paved roads and they'll stay paved roads. It's just rebuilding them. And then I have broken out and highlighted the projects that are going to pave gravel roads and convert those to hot mix asphalt. All of these projects were in the previous CIP, so none of these are new. So those have been discussed previously. Expansion of the road system.
And can you hold up just a second?
Yes, sir.
Back on enhance. Didn't we have something on 135th south of 51st along where the sewer treatment plant is, where you got straight drop-offs, there's no shoulders whatsoever?
Yes, that is one of the total of 5 road reconstruction projects. So that project is on 135th, and it goes from 29th up to 45th Street. It includes a bridge crossing, a new bridge over the Calfskin Creek, and it would address all those ditches.
I thought we had something, but I didn't see that called out, so good.
In your handout, it is.
Yep. All right, our expansion projects, these are all KDOT projects that we are putting money into. So the first one is the Northwest Expressway right-of-way acquisition. The county puts in $1 million per year, and then that is matched by KDOT. There is reimbursement from some partnering cities on that, Mays and Goddard. The East Kellogg improvements, so these are the improvements that would extend Kellogg, the freeway into Butler County. We have money allocated for that. That was also in the previous CIP. And then this year we added the K96 improvements into our CIP, so that is new in the 3.9 million.
Mays and Goddard increased, because I thought they were only putting 5,000 each.
This is over 5 years, so 5,000 times
Okay.
5.
All right. Thanks.
So the new one is K96 improvements. Okay, so our two quality of place projects, again, these are both bicycle facilities, shared use paths. First is the Maple Street Bike Path. This would connect the city of Wichita's pathway system with Goddard's pathway system. And then
Is that on the north side or south side of Maple?
it's on the north side, east of 167th, and then it switches to the south side on the other side of 167th.
I had that question just Monday night, so thank you.
All right. And there's a little bit, at the intersection of 167th, it's also, there's a little sidewalk stub on the northwest corner that goes to the mobile home park to get them access. All right. And then 382, this is a new project to the CIP, 63rd Street pathway from Linray Street, which is near Greenwich, to the Butler County line. That's 2.25. Again, the 1.62 and the 2.25, those are the total costs of the project. So our share, I've noted down there in the note that for both of those projects, we're putting in $989,000. And those are both going through WAMPO, and we expect funding on both of them. County expenditures, this shows a breakdown of where our dollars are going over this 5-year period. You can see that over 60% is going to the maintenance of roads and the maintenance of bridges on those first two categories. We have significant contributions for projects in the enhancement and expansion realms. And then we have just a sliver of money going towards quality of place, which are those two bicycle facilities, shared use paths. And then the fund sources for all these projects, you'll see that there is that jump in the final year of 2029. That's a result of the Caskin Creek flood mitigation project being in 2029 as a placeholder until we figure out funding for that project and where that's going in the future.
Is that $40 million estimated?
$40 million, $5 million would be our share, is what we have in there, I believe.
Actually, you
The 2.5.
Okay.
2.5 local sales tax and 2.5 for bond.
Oh, okay. God, it's a sizable project.
It is. That's why we got to have those partners and get additional funding from outside. So just a quick discussion about funding opportunities. Again, we're working with WAMPO on a number of projects. We expect funding on all 3 of those projects we've listed there. Those are discussions that are ongoing. Lynn has been working for congressionally directed spending. He's been working with Senator Moran's office to get funding for ARC 95, but we're going beyond that. We're going multiple routes on that one. So we've also applied again for a RAISE grant this year. This year was a $6.1 million planning grant that we went after for ARC 95. KDOT makes funds available for bridge rehabilitations and replacements. So we're putting in 4 applications in 2024 to get funding for some of our bridge projects. And then the KDOT high-risk rural roads, again, we've been notified that there's $1.6 million available for this project on MacArthur Road. So that has been added to our CIP this year. And just as a reminder, our CIP must be reviewed by the MAPC for consistency with the comprehensive plan. And so that needs to be approved by them before it goes to the BOCC for adoption. And so we have scheduled a meeting with the Advanced Plans Committee on June 13th. And then I believe for the full MAPC, we're looking at July 11th. It's just really hard to coordinate that because I need to go and talk to them in person right now since they don't have emails or phones. So not confirmed. Or carrier pigeons. All right. I'm open for questions, as is Lynn.
Daniel, thanks, and Lynn. So first of all, my compliments watching this play out, and I really appreciate it's not in here, but we've had some occasions in my district, I assume the rest of you have, where you prioritize potential paving or new paving or expansion, and you put the math behind it and it's really been helpful in my district to show that if they want to participate financially, they can move up the ladder or not. So thank you for that a lot. And but my question is that, and I assume, I'm talking about how flexible we are. I know that Greater Wichita Partnership has a couple of things that might be landing in the next few months, maybe a year, that might be similar in nature to how flexible we were in David's district. So if one of these projects lands, we are able to be flexible and adjust and shift around stuff.
Yes, without a doubt. We realize that city partnerships and other partnerships with larger developments always are a possibility, and we adjust our CIP accordingly. And that's why we come back each year and we present a 5-year CIP, but you're going to see changes in that CIP every year because we make adjustments for those types of situations.
Right. Okay, well, thanks for reassuring. And thank you again for everything.
Yep.
Any other questions? Commissioner Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. So I'm just curious on R350 gravel cold mix replacement. It's a $500,000 over $250,000 on 2 different years. Please explain what's that? What is that about?
Can you take that? So R350 is the cold mix road replacement program, as you mentioned. That is a fund center that we are looking to use when we're partnering with cities. Maybe if Derby's wanting to pave some roads on the outskirts of their city, or Valley Center, or whoever, I think that's a fund that we could look to. Maybe Lynn has something to add.
That used to be, it was originally put in the CIP. It's been around since 2018-ish. And originally the intent was to go in and do thin overlays on our asphalt roads. Since that time, we've been actually just collecting funds in that center so that we can apply them whenever we do have a road that meets a guideline, or we have a partnership that develops that is able to pave a gravel road. We have funds that we have available we can go into without having to wait 5 years down the road for it to get into a CIP. And we have off and on funded that. Right now, we currently have just under or just over $1.5 million. So we're getting to the point where we actually have enough funds for a mile of road, and this would allow us to go ahead and act on that.
And again, when you say a mile of road, you're talking about, are we talking about just hot mix asphalt on top of, not using cold mix obviously, but using hot mix asphalt? But what is there curb and gutter part of this, or what are we talking about?
Typically with these, since we're going from a gravel road, again, depending on the partner, it would be for a 2-lane rural road, which would be for 2-lane hot mix asphalt with shoulders and open ditches.
We have a whole lot of cold mix roads still. We are maintaining those with some type of.
That is correct.
Refreshing, if you will, every 7 years or so, right?
Yep. Those get a little more frequent attention, and we do a lot of in-house work on those.
So do you have a list of where the $12 million for the replacement of reconstruction, where's that $12.65 million going to replace which roads?
So that is, I believe that's on his slide, where he had noted we had 5 projects. Is that correct?
Yes.
And those are throughout the county. We can point those out to you and get you a list that has those specific ones highlighted.
Are they on the?
Yep.
I can let
can
you know
highlight
what
those
they
for
are
you.
now if you want.
Sure.
All right. So the first one is 135th. This is the one that Commissioner Dennis
Is
brought
there
up.
our number next to it?
There will be.
R360, no, that's not, 348, yeah.
That's one, okay.
No,
It's not one?
not R348.
I believe he's talking about the roads you're saying that are going from cold mix, or from gravel to,
Yeah.
Not gravel. You're replacing cold mix roads with a 12.65.
Yeah. So let me go back to the slide here. Boop, boop. R348 is a gravel road. R348 paves half a mile.
he's referring to 12.65. And
Top of the
those,
slide.
those are not necessarily replacing gravel, cold mix roads, some of them, yes. But they are just major reconstruction of the entire
Okay, but
corridor.
where's that 12.65 million in the CIP list?
So the first one is R363. That's 135th Street West from 29th North to 45th. Commissioner Dennis brought that project up just a little while ago. The next one is R364, the very next project on your list. That's 29th Street North between 119th and 135th Street. The next one is 127th Street. I'm looking for it. Is R362. So those are all grouped together there. That's the south half mile adjacent to Southeast High School down in your district. And then the last two projects are the Pawnee projects, R378 and R365. Those are the five. So they're all relatively, it was R362, R363, R364, R365, and then skipping just a few to R378.
So R362, I thought that was a partnership with Wichita.
That is,
They're going to annex the road once it's reconstructed. And I thought they had a project to pave this like several years out, and they were paying for a lot of that, which is why it's not being done by us, I believe. So I'm now seeing this on our list for about basically $1 million, but
R362.
R362 on 127th, our agreement with City of Wichita was that they were going to pave and maintain the north half of that mile, and we would go ahead and pave the south half of that mile. We had no agreement that they would take over pavement of that road.
actually I misspoke. I apologize. So this 127, this is the half mile of coal mix that we did in 20.
It was a thin overlay.
Either 16 or 18.
I was gonna say, yeah.
that was a
That's
project that I picked by Southeast High School.
That's correct.
So we are replacing that road for a half mile for $1 million.
Yes, that road, as you remember, it was a thin overlay that went down. It was not a full construction project. It was not 6 inches of asphalt that went down on that
It
road.
was an Andale project, though. We used the cement slurry technology at that time. It was a pretty nice road.
it was. And given the bus traffic it gets every day, plus the other traffic it gets from the students, it's lived its life. And we need to properly construct it now. You know, that project allowed us to push out and delay a full-on project.
All right, let me change topics. Let's go to R339, which is a different discussion here. That's the one that's on our list. It shows 2.8, just under $3 million. I thought that Wichita was partnering with us in front of Christian McAuliffe School. That was a project we pushed off because we were asking Wichita basically to do the work, and it's primarily their project. But now I'm showing $3 million in our CIP.
That's the mile to the north.
This is from
This is from Pawnee down south.
This is
Okay,
this is
I
currently a
apologize.
gravel road, so it's listed
And
under the gravel
It
road.
will play into that project in the future when we work with Wichita on that, but this is for that. They're working north of, they got the mile north they're working on right now. We got the mile south, and then that one's coming up between us.
All right. That does help. Thank you very much. And
And I will point out on that R339, we talked a little bit earlier about the paving guidelines and the scoring that we have with how we're going to categorize those roads. R339, when we put that into our system, it scored very high, and so it definitely needs to be paved. It was our highest scoring road that we had on there. Has over 400 vehicles per day.
okay, well, let's talk. So the money you have set aside in the R350. If we wanted to make a partnership with Goddard and do the 1,000-foot from go from on Hawkins Lane between, I forget the road to the north, but to the entrance of Tanganyika, could that money be used for that as a partnership with Goddard?
That would fall to the will of the board. That one has a lot of different aspects to it, but yes, I mean, it is replacing a gravel road. The one thing we want to be careful about is working with a partner so that we're not maintaining that road.
I don't want to maintain it, but I do think that that's important. You know, we talk about tourism to the community. We love Sedgwick County Zoo, but Tanganyika is also very important to this community, and I would like to see a partnership to get that done. They've been trying to solve that thing for a very long time, and I think that I'd like to see something on the CIP that basically addresses that as a partnership. Thank you.
How long is that?
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet.
As of last year, the current Goddard City Council was not interested in paving that.
They've had a lot of council changes, so I think
They have.
we need to go back and visit that again.
Moving on.
Ready for the next round?
Ready.
Okay. So I'm gonna try and get this done in 10 minutes. Is that okay, everyone? 10 minutes for this next section is my goal.
Best of luck.
Get you out of here. Okay, that's fine. I'm here. I have nothing else other than being here. So I'm just trying to be respectful of your time. Okay. So capital funding plans are primarily guided by our debt policy, and you all know that just about a month and a half ago, you approved an overhaul to the way we measure our debt under the debt policy. However, these substantive tenets about how we get to whether we're going to issue debt or not have not changed. But our policy does prefer that we will pay as we go. It prefers that we use cash funding when we can, unless it makes more sense to do debt funding based on the burden that it would put onto the rest of our financial structure. So it does require that we come through and talk about our debt issuance, not just with you all, but also as a staff at much more frequency than we talk with you. It prohibits the use of debt to fund operations. It establishes our benchmarks now for budgetary flexibility, our liquidity, and our debt limits, whereas before it was just debt limits under the former policy. And it provides the guidelines for how we structure our debt, how we issue it, and how we administer it once we actually have debt. Now remember, you can use cash, you can use fund balance to pay for projects. And so this is going to come to fruition when we talk about how you access your investment income that we're having very high returns on and that we say we want to use as one-time funding. It also will come into play when we do revenue replacement through ARPA. all of those dollars will need to be managed under this policy. So you do have ways that you can use those dollars. The top one here, this top bullet, appropriated in the following budget cycle for capital projects, is going to be what we want to have a robust conversation with you about. We've actually now moved your ARPA spend plan from May 22nd to June 5th. We're going to have one-on-one conversations with you between now and then after you have a chance to hear all of this. And we can have a conversation about that revenue replacement and investment income as a part of those conversations as we work toward a budget. So right now you can see that based on what Daniel has presented for Road and Bridge, along with what I presented earlier for facilities and drainage, we have a total program that we are asking for your approval of for now of $451 million, of which 274 million is coming in from other sources. So that leaves us with a total of about 136.2 million in cash funding over 5 years. A significant portion of that, as you can see under roads and bridges, is coming from local sales tax. So the half-penny sales tax that we have that goes to road and bridge. The remainder will come most likely from general fund cash. Now, if we were to go with the plans that have been presented, and we don't factor in any of the other conversations that we've had about decision packages and things like that, this is what your general fund forecast would look like. Now, you did just move 2 projects to the watch list, which does help this a little bit. So that deficit in 2026 is reduced to 9.6 million, and that deficit in 2027 is reduced to 10.37 million. Now, of that, a healthy chunk, obviously, is totally authorized under that excess fund balance policy that we saw before, where we are totally permitted to dip into fund balance. So again, that'll be a healthy portion of investment income, which we're estimating around $14 million coming in this year, of which less than half is what we expect to get on a recurring basis going into the future. So that leaves 8 or 9 million that would be available for this purpose, as well as potentially around 17 million in ARPA revenue replacement. So I just want to keep that on your radar. That makes our situation much better than we otherwise would be. And so my sincere thanks to David Floyd sitting in the back of the room, who does a lot of our work on that investment income and keeps an eye on that along with Brent Shelton. So, and Commissioner Beatty just mentioned that he paid his property taxes yesterday for his business. And so he is responsible for why we got to invest so much more yesterday than we even expected.
I'm nauseous, yeah.
But we appreciate it. On behalf of Sedgwick County, I thank you, Chairman. So bond and interest, we actually did take out one project that we had anticipated bond funding for the West Clinic remodel. That's a project that's now not on the active CIP. And so when we take that out, we actually see improvement, even adding in one new facility. So you can see this is our deficit, either our income or deficit projection in the bond and interest fund. So again, coming back to the point that we always harp on, I always harp on, not we, that is that to the extent we have debt retiring and we don't replace it with new debt, typically that mill levy goes to operations because we know there's a ton of demands on that side. That then makes it very hard in the future to do new debt because that debt has now, those dollars have been eaten up by operations. And it's hard, very hard, to make a case for why operations should be cut in order to fund debt service. So we have significant debt coming off in 2028. So even while we talk about revenue replacement, even when we talk about investment income and all of these projects, the thing that worries me about the plan that we've presented is we have no new debt planning to be issued in 2028. So as we identify some of these needs and some of these things, that's going to have to be a balancing act that we talk about, is what makes the most sense in order to balance out all of our needs and make sure that we're covering our capital needs, but also our operational needs, as well as not overtaxing citizens and never putting a commission in a situation where we are forced to raise property taxes in order to cover these services. With that in mind, here is the other debt service that is contemplated being issued this year and in following years. So what this shows you is the year in which we anticipate doing the issuance. So that means that depending on the timing, we may or may not have interest payments only that we make the next year, or if we do it early enough in the year where we know what principal and interest is, we'll start paying those costs the following year. We're still using 4% even as our interest rate, even though we know that with our most recent debt issuance, at what we hope is the height of interest rates, we were able to come in extremely competitively at about 3.2% true interest cost. So we're still, even in our debt issuance, we're being very conservative of how we think this will impact the forecast, and I think it will actually be more favorable when it all plays out. But you can see we have half of the county admin building that we would plan to do an issuance for later this year, in addition to a multitude of courthouse complex projects. You can see what those are listed. Those are prior year projects. Again, the way we typically do debt, but for the admin building, is we actually spend the money first, and then we reimburse ourselves for the actual costs. If you remember when we talked about the debt policy, we talked about concerns with arbitrage, that we get too much debt, then it looks like we're trying to either pay operations or benefit from that. So it's a balancing act, just like everything is. So we would anticipate these projects being completed and being able to issue debt. There are time frames. That's why I'm pushing you for the admin building to try and have a decision by July so that we can do joint debt issuances. This is only facilities. We also have a number of road and bridge projects that we're anticipating, around $8 million worth of projects that we knew that this was going to happen because it took a while to let projects, it took a while to get projects completed. So we are driven by some time constraints to have a debt issuance this year, and in order not to have to pay for two debt issuances in a short amount of time, that's why we're pushing you to try and get to an admin building decision this year so we can couple it all together. In 2025, you can see we're planning for that $22 million. Again, this would be at the conclusion of that project. It is in the forecast now. It doesn't mean it has to stay there, and it doesn't mean that even if it does stay there, that it has to stay there in this amount of money. We will refine this figure as we go through the next month or so with you all talking about how that project is going to play out. ComCare Crisis, we know, is still undergoing work, but the purchase of the land itself and the properties itself was more than we had originally included in the plan. Whether or not there's going to be enough cost savings from the remodel is yet to be determined, so this number could change. The RFSC DNA lab addition, this is probably optimistic to think that we would be in a position to have the project complete next year in order to refund or to reimburse ourselves for those costs. But this is currently what's in the plan. Again, it's only in at $7.1 million. The more conversation we have, the more unrealistic it seems that will be the final cost. Our household hazardous waste facility expansion, again, while that's going to be new debt, that debt service will be paid by your solid waste fee. The adult detention facility kitchen is new, but it's now in the forecast that you've seen today, as well as our ComCare peer housing project. And then in 2026, we anticipate that the county administration building would be complete based on the timeline that was outlined last year. Again, we'll be very flexible on this. The forecast gets updated every quarter. But that would be the completion of the project and reimbursing ourselves for those actual costs over and above the debt issuance we've already done. We do have $2.1 million in for EMS post-1 replacement. I've already told you that will probably change based on a CIP amendment we want to bring to you. If you all authorize that, I think that would be another good candidate for revenue replacement to buy down future debt that we have to have. And then finally, that public works salt storage building that we talked about. We anticipate that project being complete in 2026. So that is when we would issue that. Now, there's other projects in there, but they're small. And basically, it's all going to be determined now based on whatever activity you take to approve this year's CIP. And then whatever is pulled off of that watch list, again, $14.4 million worth of stuff that just needs more conversation. And so that could add to this. So that is what I have to present to you. You now have heard all the stuff that you have to consider for this year's budget, and we'll have a conversation on Tuesday about your prioritization and thoughts on everything you've heard. So what questions can I address?
Quick
You
question.
are hilarious. Thank you, timekeeper, for telling me I have 30 seconds left. You worked very hard on that sign. I'm glad you were doing that instead of paying attention to me. Another write-up, second one today. You're on track for trouble.
Did I miss it, or where is the emergency management building in our CIP?
So right now, it's essentially funded to the extent there's grant funding. So there is no grant funding, so we have paid for it up to this point. It's in your quarterly report that we have paid for it, but we don't actually have a project budget approved for it at this point because we're waiting to see what we get the grants for and whether there's federal money that comes down. But it's not anticipated to be bond funded. It would be grant funded.
But when I'm looking at priorities of a lot of things, it seems like it's a pretty high priority. We just keep trying to get grants for it. So why wouldn't we have it in our CIP so we know that that's something that we want to do?
I think because right now we're in kind of a limbo state. So we know that it's already been approved as a CIP amendment. It's not in for bond funding because we're hoping for it to be essentially cash funded through a grant. We're going through that process right this second. The due date is next month on DCIP, and depending on where that goes, then we'll need to circle back with the commission and get direction from you all as to how you want to address that, whether you want to move it into a bond funded plan or if you want to take some other alternative path.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, it's already approved, right? It's already an approved project because it went through a CIP amendment.
It was a approved project, but the will of the commission at the time was to obtain grant funding for it and not spend general fund or bond it.
How much was the expected price of that again cost?
It's around 16 million.
16,
And
got it.
But that's the
architect is-
full scope of the project.
Yeah.
at the moment,
So
unless
we're after
inflation changes.
2 million from Moran's office and the remainder through the DOD grant.
DCIP, yep. And so we're working through that too, because with DCIP, you have to have a grant and or a match, and we don't know if the federal money from Moran can constitute a match. So there's going to still, assuming we get that, so there's still going to be even some more conversation that we have to have about how we fund that. But
I will add that in preparation for the grant this year, we are going through with construction documents right now with an architect and engineer. So we hope that it'll help us
Strengthen the application.
strengthen our application and position us to
Right,
receive the
shovel
reward
ready.
later this year.
Very good. Okay, any other questions? It's a lot today. Good job, everybody that presented and added to this. Okay. That it, Tom? Lindsay, you good? Maureen? Thank you. Appreciate all the work that's gone into this from the committee's angle, and we'll get this thing tightened up.
see you Tuesday.
See you Tuesday.